Records were smashed, and there's a new passing leader in the state of Louisiana. On Friday night, 5-star plus quarterback Arch Manning went out and threw 7 touchdowns, smashing his uncle and both of his uncle's records in one night. I am your host, Josh Newberg, and this is the Inside Scoop. Up first, we have Director of Recruiting Chad Simmons. Chad, welcome to the show.
Oh, happy to be back, Josh. Happy to be here.
All right, we're not going to start quite yet with Arch Manning. We're going to get into that with Sam Spiegelman. But first, I want to talk to you about 5-star David Hobbs. He made a big visit this week, and actually he went to 2 schools. He was at Ohio State and Michigan. What are you hearing on this?
Yeah, I mean, everything kind of happened quickly there. I mean, this time a week ago looked like Hobbs was going to be at Auburn for the LSU game for an unofficial visit. Ohio State came in with an offer early last week, and just like that, things changed. And then heading into the weekend, it was thought that he would visit Ohio State and come back home to North Carolina, but he went to Ohio State, left that game, drove to Michigan, and then got home, I think, early morning hours on Monday. So a very busy weekend for the new 5-star out of Concord, North Carolina. And I'm hearing both schools made strong impressions. Obviously, he spent more time at Ohio State, spent, over 24 hours in Columbus, going from arriving on Friday, staying through the game into the night, Saturday evening, meeting with Larry Johnson, Ryan Day, seeing the game day atmosphere, getting a look around campus, then decided last minute to take a trip to Michigan, spent about 5 or 6 hours in Ann Arbor, so not quite the in-depth trip that he had to Ohio State, but he left feeling good about Michigan as well. And I think both of those schools have given him something to think about. He has 2 OVs remaining, and right now they're locked in with 2 other schools, Alabama and Georgia. But he did mention that he will think about, does he want to change those out or flip schools with that? But I think Ohio State and Michigan made strong first impressions.
Ohio State was obviously the primary destination for the weekend, but Michigan was able to get him on campus. Do you think that visit to Michigan was impactful enough maybe to secure an official visit down the road?
I would lean towards, if one of these schools gets an OV, I would lean towards Ohio State based on what I'm hearing fresh off this visit. Now, he did say he'll get back home, take some time and talk with his family about these trips and really how impactful they were. But if I had to pick one getting an OV at this point, based on the feedback I've gotten so far, it would be Ohio State.
Okay. He was at Tennessee last weekend. We feel good that he's going to be back at Alabama at some point. Who do you think right now is the team to beat for David Hobbs?
Yeah, depending on who you talk to, you hear maybe a different top 2. But the one school that's consistent, regardless of who I talk to and which source it is, Alabama's there. And it seems like heading into at least this past weekend, going to Ohio State and Michigan, that Bama, was the school trending at the top, and then depending on who I talked to, again, it goes to number 2. Is it Tennessee? Is it Georgia? And really, could this weekend have impacted that top 2 or 3? I do think, though, based on what I'm hearing, Alabama is probably the school still to beat right now. But let's let the dust settle on these trips. We're going to have some time to talk to some families, talk with some college coaches this week, and figure out maybe if we're still hearing the same thing. But right now, I would still lean towards Alabama being that top school, with Tennessee and Georgia right there. And we're still kind of waiting to see just how big those trips were to Ohio State and Michigan this weekend.
Yeah, we'll see if those impact his recruitment. On Thursday, we were able to catch up with you when you were making a special trip to the East Coast to see 5-star offensive lineman Samson Okunlola. He's a 6'5", 305-pound offensive tackle that is currently uncommitted. So you went to go see one of the top prospects in America that's still available. What did you learn about his recruitment?
We don't have to call him Samson. We just call him the Pancake Honcho. I mean, that's his name. He goes by it, social media. He's trying to get some NIL deals around that Pancake brand. But what I did learn is that I would say that Miami's still in the driver's seat. So is that really anything new? Probably not. He was definitely talked about as a potential Miami commit, late summer. into July and August. He decided to hold back and not commit at that time. And here we are now going into October, still uncommitted, one of the top uncommitted guys in the country. And I think Miami's still the school to beat. I think the biggest takeaways from this trip is he's likely to cut his list down one final time, maybe a Final Four, Final Five. He's looking into taking at least one more official visit, maybe two, to get him up to his five, and then make a decision. But he didn't rule out a decision really at any time. There's no set date, no set timeline. The biggest thing about Samson right now is all his games the rest of this season outside of one weekend in November are on Saturdays. So his visits are very limited during the season. He's likely, if he does take an OV or two, or even an unofficial, is likely to come after the season. So if he wants to finish that part out first before he commits, we're looking at probably a closer to the early signing period decision.
Okay, and that's great because we need some drama down the stretch. And right now, with all these guys coming off the board, we need as many 5 stars holding out as they can. Makes it more fun at the end. Let's go down to the 305, one of the most explosive pass rushers in the country. Miami Central's 4-star edge rusher, Ruben Bain, was at Auburn this weekend. Now, Miami's making a huge push to keep some of these top elite prospects in state. They've done a good job with Ruben Bain. They landed his teammate, Wesley Basaint, last year, linebacker in the 2022 class. But seeing Auburn get him on campus makes me think, with Miami slipping, is there a chance that other teams like Auburn, Alabama, Georgia could come in and maybe take him from the state of Florida?
Yeah, Josh. I mean, I mentioned it last week talking about, Quay Russo and James Smith. I mean, the Auburn staff's doing a good job connecting with these kids and really building those relationships. And these kids like that culture of the people around Auburn. I mean, Ruben Bain took his OV to Auburn in the summer, and everybody knows what's going on at Auburn and the chatter around Brian Harsin and the uncertainty about his future on the Plains. But for Bain to go back on his own dime, spend basically the weekend on the Plains, just tells you the interest is legit in the Auburn Tigers. There's no doubt that Miami has some threats outside of their state. Of course, Florida State's in their state. They're a threat. Alabama is a major threat. You can't count Auburn out completely either. USC's trying to come in hard. He talks to Leakin Riley multiple times a week. They may get an OV from him as well. But yeah, Miami does have the backyard thing in their favor. He did have an uncle that played at Miami. He obviously grew up watching Miami. He's very familiar with Miami, but this is not a slam dunk that is going to Miami. There is some competition there.
Yeah, and Ruben's another one that's going to hold out and not make a decision anytime soon. Who are you tagging as some of the likely destinations that he could take official visits to when he's ready?
If I had to pick the two, he took Auburn, Alabama, and Oklahoma in the summer. If I had to lean towards the two, I would think Miami, even though it is a backyard school. And I would say USC, right now. Louisville is a school to keep an eye on. Florida State is as well. He's visited Louisville for a game already this year. He plans to be at Florida State soon. He's very close with Randy Shannon, who was a one-time Miami coach at Florida State. So there's a connection there too. His uncle knows Randy Shannon really well. He played at Miami. So there's some connections out there, and Louisville loves to recruit, South Florida. He knows guys that have played there and that are there on campus right now. And then USC's coming hard trying to get him out to LA. And I think that definitely appeals to Ruben Bain, going from, South Florida to Hollywood, LA, seeing what it's like out there. And we know USC's playing at a high level so far in the Raleigh this season. So if I had to pick two schools to get OVs, I would lean towards USC and Miami.
Well, there's a lot of really good programs that'll be vying for those two spots. A lot of competition there, and those final visits could tell the story of Ruben Bain's recruitment. Let's move on to Memphis linebacker commit Aryan Carter. He's a 4-star prospect, but early on he committed to Memphis when he didn't have a whole lot of options. Well, everything's changed since he put out his senior highlight tape, and he was at Alabama a couple weeks ago, but newly offer came from USC. What is Aryan Carter thinking right now? Committed to Memphis, but all these big-time schools knocking at his door.
Yeah, it's happened super fast, for him and his family. I'll say that, and talking to him and people in his circle, the word overwhelmed has come up multiple times on both sides, and just, really trying to take it all in, get on the phone with all these different coaches from different schools, figure out, does he want to take some unofficials first, then decide on official visits? Does he want to stay with Memphis or not? There's a lot happening day to day right now for Aryan Carter, the new four-star linebacker from Smyrna, Tennessee. But I do think, Alabama has done a great job. When they offered, they got him on campus right away. Spent time with him and his family in Tuscaloosa, meeting Nick Saban. I don't want to say hearing Alabama's pitch, but seeing what they're about, how they do things, how the program's structured in Tuscaloosa made a big impression. I think Bama's definitely a lock to get one of those official visits, and the others are still being fought for. I have a pretty good idea who may get some, but nothing's locked in just yet.
All right. Well, I'm putting Aryan Carter down on flip watch right now because it sure sounds like he's going to have some choices to make when it comes time. All right, Chad, thank you for joining us on the Inside Scoop. We'll talk to you on Thursday.
Sounds good, Josh.
See ya. We are back on the Inside Scoop. Up next, national recruiting analyst Sam Spiegelman. Sam, welcome to the show.
Yep, thanks for having me, Josh.
All right, we teased it at the start. Newman High School quarterback, 5-star plus gunslinger Arch Manning went out Friday night and destroyed the record books. He broke in one game. He broke both of his uncle's passing records. He went, I have it right here, 17 of 28, 356 yards and 7 touchdowns. Now, Sam, you've seen a lot of Arch Manning over the years. How would you put this game amongst some of his other good games?
As expected. We talked about the primetime loss he had on the road a week ago. He doesn't have 2 bad games in a row. He's not that kind of player. He came back with conviction. He didn't even have to play the 4 quarters to throw 7 touchdowns to, I think, 4 different receivers. Extremely efficient, just exactly what you would expect from Arch Manning after, I think, what would he consider a frustrating Week 4 loss at Manny. He came back again on the road, was absolutely efficient. He's distributing to a number of different weapons. He's playing without Will Randall, his top pass catcher, like him, committed to the University of Texas. He breaks both of his uncle's records. He's sitting in the 4th quarter. Afterwards, they force him to take the game ball. He's so selfless. And from talking to people that were at the game, probably the best moment was just being with his family after the game. The records are great. They're an aside to Arch, but getting that win, getting back in the win column, kind of finding his stride in this offense, that's really what he cares about.
What do you think he's improved on most this season as a quarterback?
Yeah, well, the one thing that I always look at with elite quarterbacks is, do they plateau or do they continue to ascend each year? And this year he's with a different offense. He's without his top pass catcher. He has the quickest release in all of high school football. I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback get rid of the ball, but the way he sees the field, the way he can't anticipate where his receivers are going to be, his accuracy, you don't see senior quarterbacks get rid of the ball so early and place it right on the money every single time. He has great anticipation. He just has a great understanding of football and this offense. He sees things as they happen. He obviously is using his legs at probably to the best that he's ever been able to extend plays, to get outside the pocket, to get out in space and make defenders miss. He's been running with the football, and that's why he's close to so many different records, because he's not only just throwing it at a high level, he's running it really well as well.
Yeah. Speaking on that, what other records are there left for him to break?
Yeah, he has most of them at this point. Both of the uncles are out of the way, but he is 3 away from tying former Newman quarterback Jay Tyler, who played wide receiver at Stanford, for the all-time touchdown mark at Newman. That's passing, rushing, receiving, returning. And with 4, he will then hold basically all of the big records at Newman: the all-time leading passer, the all-time passing touchdown leader, and then the all-time touchdown leader, which I imagine, he might not even need 4 quarters on Friday to get to. He's playing so well at this point. It might just be just another hurdle en route to where they ultimately want to be.
Everybody has a crazy uncle, right? Like in their family, everybody has a crazy uncle. Who do you think he refers to as the crazy uncle? Eli or Peyton?
I think, personally, just from hearing stories over the years, I do think he is close with his uncle Peyton. Every summer, he goes out to Colorado and spends a couple of days out there with Uncle Peyton. When he was a sophomore, I think his dad, Cooper Manning, called it Peyton 101. So, naturally, after he committed to Texas, I checked in with Peyton, and he said that Arch passed Peyton 202, so he keeps ascending in his courses. Kind of like his uncle Peyton, they're just kind of football junkies. They kind of like live off this stuff. They love exploiting matchups and watching tape and trying to reinvent the wheel, if you will. So I think they get along really well, and I think it's kind of a unique relationship since we're all so familiar with Peyton Manning and his football knowledge. To see the next generation in Arch is pretty astonishing.
All right, let's stay in the state of Louisiana and stick with the 5-star theme. Defensive back Derrick Williams, who's committed to Texas, is now planning a trip to Alabama. Alabama was a major threat to Landon before he committed to Texas. Is this visit significant, and what are you hearing about his recruitment?
Yeah, well, like you said, Alabama was definitely the team that was trending on the On3 recruiting prediction machine before he popped to Texas. That was days after his official visit to Austin, days after aforementioned Arch Manning committed to Texas. Texas has a lot of momentum. They still have a lot of momentum with Derrick Williams. He was on campus last month. He's got great relationships with Steve Sarkisian, Terry Joseph, Brandon Harris. The commitment is still in place, but this has always been kind of a long game play. Derrick is fully invested in his senior season right now, and he's taking these visits. He's still, checking those boxes, exploring his options, but it's far away from making a final decision. This visit does loom large. Pete Golding is leading the recruitment for Derrick Williams. Pete Golding is, he signed a player from New Iberia Westgate last year from Danny Lewis, who was wanted by LSU in Florida. He's been the lead guy in Derrick's recruitment for several years. So I think that this visit has been a long time coming, along with Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, Miami are all still shooting their shot with Derrick Williams. He's a 5-star safety. Everybody is wanting him to kind of take a chance on him before he signs on the dotted line. I think this recruitment has a long way to go. I think there's still a couple of legs and chapters ahead of us, but Alabama is definitely a team to watch. They've always been a team to watch, and even though he's committed to Texas and comfortable with that, it's still Alabama, and they're still a serious threat to keep an eye on here.
Okay, you heard it here first, folks. Committed to Texas, visits coming, plus a final decision looming. So lots left in this recruitment. All right, in the state of Alabama, there's a pair of 5-star teammates, Quay Russo and 5-star James Smith, both on the defensive line, and there's a battle taking place between the in-state teams, Alabama and Auburn. They've been to Alabama before, and this past weekend they were at Auburn. Did Auburn do enough to make an impact on these two teammates?
Yeah, from talking to James Smith and Quay Russo, after their game on Friday, from kind of getting the vibe of their recruitments, there seems to be 2 or 3 teams that are really sticking with these guys. Now, they were at the Plains over the weekend for the LSU game. They saw them put up a donut in the first half. That Auburn defense was flying around, and they view James Smith, they view Quay Russo as instant impact players on that defense. Auburn is trying to keep those guys home. They're the top 2 players in the state, and they're basically, selling early playing time, playing on an SEC defense in your home state, and that's why they're entrenched as a serious contender. The other is Florida. Florida will host both James and Quay for an official visit in 2 weeks when LSU comes into town. And Quay made some interesting comments about Billy Napier bringing Florida back, and we saw that over the weekend with another dub. But really the vibe around these two with James Smith, with Quay Russo, is Alabama. Both were wearing crimson red gloves during their game Friday in Baton Rouge. I'm talking to James afterwards. The entire Alabama coaching staff is recruiting him. They've made no secrets about the fact that he's a top priority in the state at his position along the defensive front. He's a very mature kid that has a great self-awareness, and kind of aware of his ranking, aware that everyone has eyes on him. His recruitment is so heavily covered. But he talked about his relationships with Alabama, with the coaches, with former players, being from Montgomery, and I feel good about where Alabama stands moving forward at this point in his senior season. And as with Quay, we know that On3's director of recruiting put in an RPM for Alabama with Quay Russo. I got similar vibes. Like I said, Florida is really in it. Their turnaround has caught his attention. Auburn thinks that Quay can come in and play right away. But Charles Kelly, Freddie Roach, Pete Golding are doing a phenomenal job with Quay Russo. Guys like Will Anderson have success, and they see the blueprint there. So like Chad following in his footsteps, I like where Alabama sits with both of these elite Alabama guys midway through their senior season.
But do you like them enough to put your pick in?
I'm on the fence. I need some more time. We don't want to rush anything. These are some high-profile guys, and there's some big visits ahead. This Florida OV looms large. They're in no rush to make a decision. But I think at this, it's fair to say that the Tide leads. Okay,
Sam. Thanks for all the intel. Oh, wait, we have a little bit more to talk about. There's a new development happening right now. 4-star Texas athlete Mikhail Harrison-Pilot, who you recently put an RPM in about 2 weeks ago to Texas. You've now changed your pick. Tell the folks why and where you think he's headed.
Yeah, I went ahead to put an RPM in for TCU, which got Mikhail Harrison-Pilot on campus again over the weekend for the Oklahoma game. We all saw how that game turned out, but behind the scenes, Malcolm Kelly, Brian Carrington, Sonny Dykes, the entire TCU coaching staff has been focused in on Mikhail Harrison-Pilot for several years at this point. Oklahoma had faded out at this when Cale Gundy left the team. Texas had hosted him for the Alabama game. He raved about the environment in Austin. We see that Texas is still after several wide receivers, but Mikhail Harrison-Pilot has officially narrowed his top teams down to 2. TCU and Houston, where his dad used to coach. He's been to Houston 100 times. I think that TCU has a lot of momentum in the state. I think that they're viewed as somewhat of a surprise team. But, TCU has a reputation and had under Gary Patterson. The fact that there's familiar faces like Malcolm Kelly there and Sonny Dykes and Brian Carrington, who are at Texas, at TCU, at SMU, now at TCU, they've kind of found their groove on the recruiting trail. They're doing a fantastic job with Mikhail Harrison-Pilot, who, again, will not make a decision until December. So there's still some more visits, some more hurdles to jump through in this recruitment. But I think TCU made a significant move over the weekend, and now I believe that they're the team to watch as December looms.
That's interesting because we thought that when Jalen Hale committed to Alabama, that this opened the door for Mikhail Harrison-Pilot to be an offensive weapon for Texas, but now they're still going to, it looks like if it goes down the way you're saying, they're still going to be searching for that. So we'll keep an eye on that. Sam, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again on Thursday. Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. Up next, I have Director of Scouting and Rankings for On3, Charles Power. We're going to talk a little offensive line. We don't get to talk about the big men enough, and On3 has 4 5-star offensive linemen ranked in the Player 2023 rankings. They are Charles Jagasaw, who's committed to Notre Dame, Javen Williams, committed to Penn State, Francis Malagoa, committed to Miami, and Zalance Hurd, committed to LSU. Charles Power, who stands out? Who's really performing up to the 5-star level this season?
Yeah, we think this is a great group, first of all. To have that many 5-star offensive linemen this early or at this juncture in the cycle is very encouraging. I think just comparing this offensive line cycle to past cycles, it's just loaded with big framed plus athletes. These guys all kind of check the boxes from a measurable standpoint. So we're excited about the group in general. I think starting off with Charles Jagasaw, he's continued to show the skills that we liked to have him ranked so high initially this time a year ago. Plays both sides of the ball, offensive and defensive line. That's a theme you kind of see with a lot of these top offensive linemen. Many of them were defensive linemen early on in their high school career and have kind of grown into that offensive lineman. But just functional movement, great base, balance. He doesn't play against the best competition, so he's one that we're really looking forward to seeing in the all-star setting. I think that'll really kind of show how he how he plays against just bigger defensive linemen. It's not something we see a ton from him at the high school level. Javen Williams has had some really exciting moments. The Penn State commit, just some highlight plays, just individual blocks, and just his ability to get to the second level, I think is really special at this juncture in his high school career. He just is an exceptional mover, very strong. He's one of the top shot put throwers in the country, and you can kind of see that burst and explosion on the field. He's also very young for the cycle too. I mean, this is a guy who turned 17 years old like basically a month ago, so he really could be a class of 2024 prospect. And I think we're seeing his development just kind of continue to spike as he gets older. Francis Mauigoa, I would say of this group, probably has the highest floor, and that's in that like he is ready to go physically. He's 6'5", 325 pounds, moves very well, plays top competition at IMG, so he's less of a projection than some of these others. Like, we really know what we're getting with Francis Mauigoa, and I think if I was going to place a bet on who of this group is the most likely to start as a true freshman, I would go with him. Zalance Hurd has supreme length. He probably is the most developmental of this group, given that he's played offensive line for 1 year, a former defensive lineman who transferred schools, played 1 year of offensive line as a junior, flipped over to left tackle this year. I watched one of his games early this fall, and it was a complete slop, mud fest, probably one of the muddiest games I've ever seen, but he was physical, and I think it was encouraging to kind of see him run blocking in that setting too. So really good group of 5 stars.
You've been watching a ton of film recently, and I just got to ask, is there anybody that's on the cusp of maybe adding to those 4 or 5-star offensive linemen? Could we maybe see a 5th or a 6th 5-star offensive lineman before it's over?
Yeah, it's going to be really fun to sort this group out really in the next a couple months and on into January when we put out our final rankings. But the 2 that I would highlight as movers kind of on that 5-star cusp range within the top 30 are Ohio State commit Luke Montgomery and Georgia commit Monroe Freeling. So Luke Montgomery, I would say Luke Montgomery probably has the most impressive early senior video of any of the offensive linemen we've watched so far. He has just really taken the next step. Like many of these, a former defensive lineman who has kind of grown into an offensive lineman. Most of these guys still play both ways, and Luke Montgomery does that too, but he's playing left tackle for his high school and just phenomenal with his movement skills, punch. Everything you see from him really translates. And he just kind of moves at a little bit of a different speed than these others. And one thing with Luke Montgomery, I think that will help him get on the field early, potentially at Ohio State, is I think he can play all 5 positions on the offensive line, including tackle. We have him ranked as an interior offensive lineman right now, but I think his length and dimensions and just kind of getting more information on that, I think he could play any spot on the offensive line. So really excited about what he's shown so far. And I think if he continues to play this way, he will be heavily in the 5-star conversation. Monroe Freeling, I think of all this group, he really has an argument of having maybe the most translatable physical traits. And maybe if you're projecting towards the NFL, he might be your guy. He's 6'7" plus, 285 pounds, has continued to grow into his frame. Great length, big frame, 11-inch hands, and he is highly flexible. He might be the most flexible athlete of all of this group we've talked about so far. He's still developing in terms of his strength and his base, but I watched one of his games, I think it was last Friday, and just very, very impressive with his movement skills. He's a bouncy, twitchy athlete. Really has no problems at the high school level with the guys he goes against, and they put him at defensive tackle on pass rush snaps, and he was virtually unblockable. So I think a ton of upside with him. You probably might look a year or 2 down the road, and after he's in a college weight program at Georgia, I think you could see him blow up.
Okay, now we're about halfway through the high school season right now, which there's a lot of tape to evaluate, and you've spent countless hours in your basement or wherever you watch film. Who are some offensive line prospects that maybe not be on the cusp of being a 5-star, but you could see move up the rankings?
So 3 that have moved up within the top 100, kind of in that group, probably from 50 to 100, are Alabama commit Wilkin Formby, Notre Dame commit Sullivan Absher, and Texas A&M commit Chase Basantis. Wilkin Formby is just a massive tackle. He's continued to grow physically. He's 6'8", over 300 pounds, and just swallows pass rushers. Seen some encouraging physicality from him. So watching one of his games early in the season, and his helmet popped off, and he still pancaked the defensive end. So just moving around, making plays, a really big offensive tackle who, when you see him, he's a first off the bus type for sure. Sullivan Absher, Notre Dame commit, plays in a wing T offense, so he's a little bit of a difficult projection as an offensive tackle, but his ability as a run blocker and just to get low as a drive blocker at his size at 6'6", 295 pounds is pretty unique from what we've seen. And Chase Basantis is having a great year at Don Bosco in New Jersey. Watched one of his games earlier in the season, and just really a dominant high school offensive lineman. He plays left tackle at Don Bosco. I think he's more likely to play inside long term, and I would group him with Francis Malagoa as one who is highly likely, or of this group, maybe the most likely to get on the field early as a freshman.
All right, there you have it. The latest on the offensive line from Director of Scouting and Rankings, Charles Power. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. Make sure you smash that subscribe button for me, and remember to check out all the videos on the On3 YouTube page.